Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Case by Case. My name is Amy. Today is Wednesday, March 19th at 7 p.m. I will be doing the avatar picture tonight because I worked all day. But tonight we are discussing the Delphi case, and we have a special guest. Her name is Erica Morse, and I'm going to get into her bio here in a little bit. For those of you who are new to the channel or new to this case surrounds the deaths of two young teenage girls, Abigail Williams and Liberty German. They are why we're here. Please keep the chat respectful. We will be answering questions later on tonight throughout the live. In the meantime, we're just going to do a quick review of what this case is about for those of you who are new or those of you who are watching on the replay. Welcome, mods. Welcome, everybody, into chat. Let's get this started.
Hello, case, two missing juveniles. Abigail Joyce Williams.
It's getting scared now. It's getting cold.
Liberty Rose Lynn German.
Missing, abducted, we don't know for sure.
Last seen at the High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana.
Delphi is just not one of those places where any of us ever thought that something like this would happen.
Despite that video, despite that audio, nothing happens, seemingly, for 6 years.
The judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it?
No. They got the wrong guy. There's no way.
There are other people who were looked at for this.
Shame on you!
It's some sort of a religious sect/cult
Shame on you, Richard!
that follow Odinism.
Shame on you, Richard Allen!
I believe they sacrificed a girl and killed another one.
And law enforcement insists no one's ever been cleared.
Baldwin, can you provide any comment?
Journalism. It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome, Cherie. Welcome, Erica.
Hello.
Hi, thank you. Sorry I had my mic muted.
That's okay. You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, we have a little bit of Erica is in the middle of some storms tonight, so we might have a little bit of feedback in her audio. We're going to try to keep that down to a minimum as much as possible. But let me give you guys, you are all in for a huge treat tonight. I'm going to give you Erica's background. Erica Morse is an investigative reporter. She's a victim's advocate and a private investigator. She got her start as a junior reporter at the Michigan City News Dispatch in 1991. Over the next 25 years, Erica went on to work in every role except engineering at radio stations in South Bend, Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, and throughout Texas, working her way up to station manager and statewide general manager. In 2018, Erica became the licensed private investigator in Texas, resulting in the 2021 arrest of Sean Atkins for the 2010 murder of 13-year-old Haley Dunn. After Atkins' arrest, Erica moved back home to Indiana in 2023. She was hired as the senior private investigator for Jensen Investigations of Indiana to lead the fact-finding effort on behalf of Rick Allen's trial lawyers. To date, she is still employed as a private investigator. Welcome, Erica. Come on in and say your hello.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you to everyone for giving me an opportunity to speak.
So why don't you go ahead and let everyone in chat know why you've decided to speak out today and a little bit of the past several weeks ordeals that you've had to go through to be here.
Wow, just the last several weeks, condensing that is a little tough. Why I'm here tonight is because of Prof. And I don't know if, you know, what your rules are in other channels, but I do just want to say that after many years of being misunderstood, misrepresented, and having people create narratives for me that are completely false, it felt really good last night to have somebody stand up for me. And he gave me the courage to finally speak out. I'm an emotional person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. So if I tear up a little bit tonight, I apologize in advance. I love my work and I love what I do, and I take it very, very seriously. So to have my work be trashed and misrepresented by people who have never met me or spoken to me is extremely painful. To have trolls from other cases like the Haley Dunn case stick their noses into this one where they don't belong without having any concept or understanding of what it was we were hired to do and by whom. It's been a painful ride. As you alluded to, I've been facing some charges. I'm a 50-year-old woman who had virtually no criminal record in my entire life. Minus, I mean, I got in trouble 20 years ago. I owned it, whatever. But suddenly I'm a 50-year-old woman who is amassing a criminal record. And that is not because I'm a criminal. It is because I am a very strong-willed, fierce advocate. The reason I brought up the News Dispatch in my bio for you is so that people can begin to make some very long-standing connections. When I started my work back in 1991 at the Michigan City News Dispatch, I was being trained as a reporter in crime. And way back then is when I began to learn about Indiana police corruption, about the way police officers manipulate information, how they trick the public, how they trick suspects, and how they trick the press. And I have dedicated my life, whether it be through my various roles in newspaper reporting, running newsrooms and radio stations, or even working as a independent contractor and a correspondent for newspapers and other radio stations over the last 35 years. I mean, my entire life has been media and investigations, and every day someone I don't know is out there calling me a fraud. So I really wanted to start to draw the connections between my entire career that has spanned more than 35 years now, having learned things back all the way back in 1991 about police corruption, watching police officers in my own town go to prison for, you know, narcotics officers in my hometown of Michigan City going to prison for putting narcotics back on the streets, and now trying to convey all these years later that some of those police officers and their partners are still on those forces, and that their local jurisdiction of Indiana State Police is Lowell. And when Lowell gets involved, that is when the connections between Michigan City being 90 miles north, going straight down 421 to Delphi, become very significant to a case like this. And it is time that I create my own narrative for you all. Let me back that up. I don't need to create a narrative. I am who I am. I am proud of the work I've done. I'm proud of the work that Chrissy has done. And I am here to set the record straight as much as I can and to be as honest and transparent as I can be, knowing that every word I say is being scrutinized by police officers, by the LaPorte County, Indiana District Attorney's Office, and by people who I thought were on my own team. And so to the people, I caught a woman in chat earlier who said she was willing to listen to me. To that woman, I say to you, you've never had the chance to listen to me before. Because I have been silenced, I have been threatened, I have been intimidated, and I have been told for the last 2 years that if I speak out on anything, that I will hurt Rick. And considering that Kathy has become one of my best friends, no threat could have hurt me or scared me more than hurting Rick. So that's kind of my piece, I guess. I know we talked about some topics, and I know you have some questions. And so I'll stop for a second and kind of turn it back over to you to segue, however you want to do this.
Well, let me see here. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming here when you could have gone anywhere. I understand how you took what Prof said last night as encouragement. I agreed with some of the things that he said. I don't know all of the details. And I think that my channel, I try to keep my channel as even balanced as possible and not on one side of the fence or the other. I've always gravitated towards the truth or towards the people who are closest to the truth. And I think, you know, you and Christine have always, to me personally, have always kept that red line of this is what we can discuss and this is what we can't discuss. So when people have said otherwise, I go, no. You know, behind the scenes, I've not encountered that. I'm grateful that you now feel brave enough to come out and speak. And at the end of the day, for everyone who's listening and everyone who feels passionate about this case, if you're all here for the same reasons that I'm here, and that is because these 2 little girls were taken from this earth far too early, and we have no answers. And the circumstances of this case are still so vastly unknown. I'm not willing to commit to any type of a theory or narrative whatsoever. I want the truth. And there's so much that has yet to come out of this case. And after a trial and a man being sentenced to 130 years, we are in the wrong place right now. We are in the absolute wrong place. And the only way that we're going to be able to right this wrong is by proving Rick Allen's innocence and by proving really what happened to Abby and Libby. Because as far as the state of Indiana is concerned, this case is over. And we have a lot of work to do. And I'm here to do that work on behalf of the girls. And I'm so frustrated, like I'm sure so many people are, with the lies and the fact that the state has completely, they have lost all grounds with me personally, and I'm sure with a lot of people in the chat and a lot of people listening on the replay. The lies about the facts of this case, the lies about what happened during the first month of the investigation, the lies about the actual investigation itself and the direction that it was going, that now they want us to believe is a completely fabrication of, the defense is making. And it's not. It was their investigation. It was the state's investigation, the Odinism, all of the, the Brad Holder, the Patrick Westfall, the Elvis Fields, all of that came from the state, not from, Brad and Andy. So I am ready for Erica to dive in and discuss her position, where she's coming from. There's a couple of things that I want to address from my last week's live, and we'll take it from there. So Erica?
One of the things that I really want to clarify, and Amy, thank you for giving me the chance to kind of go into this before we start talking about the specific case itself, is how Chris and I became involved in this case as PIs. Because there has been a lot of chatter about us not truly being involved, and I'm very sorry to say to anyone who has put that out there that that is a false and inaccurate statement. Christine and I are very well known throughout the state of Indiana for our work with missing children. We have brought more than 60 people home alive over the last 13 or 14 years of working together now. And we take pride in those numbers. And it was an appearance on Court TV in late 22 or early of 23. Jason Jensen and I were on together. I believe we were discussing Delphi that night. And immediately after we got off the air, my phone rang, and it was Jason. And he said, I want to open an agency in Indiana, and I want to work this Delphi case because I think that Richard Allen is the wrong guy. And I said, well, I think I agree with you based on what I've seen. I mean, I knew the case. I'd followed it a little bit. I had not been involved to the intricate level that all of you have out there in YouTube land, because I was at the time that all of this transpired, I had just lost 3 relatives. Within a 45-day period. I'd lost my grandmother. We lost a relative to suicide, and then I lost my mother 45 days later. So I was in a complete state of grief at the time all of this was occurring. Jason reached out to me and said, I want to do this. And I didn't realize that you were back in Indiana now. And I said, yeah, I came home. Everybody got sick, and I needed to come home and take care of family. And he said, well, I want to open an agency in Indiana. Would you lead this agency? And I'm like, sure. I eventually want to do a PI agency with Chris in Indiana anyway. Indiana had just changed their laws. Every state has very different laws on their licensing requirements. So Indiana was unwilling to accept the thousands of hours that I had already in Texas as a licensed PI. They were not willing to transfer those hours. So Jason, as an agency owner, was eligible to transfer his, kind of, because he's an agency owner in Utah, he was able to open an agency in Indiana. My hours didn't qualify me, even though I had enough hours. 3,000 is the criteria, and I was well over that. So Jason opened the agency out of Utah. I was listed as the registered agent. Then I invested my own money to lease and furnish and open an office on Franklin Street in Michigan City that Chris and I opened. I believe it was in February or March of 2023. I'm sorry. Yeah, sounds right. Around that time, I think it was February. And then there was a delay in the licensing. Indiana is usually pretty good about approving agency licenses quickly. There was a 4-month delay, and I felt, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I felt very strongly that delay was intentionally due to the fact that they knew we were going to be acting as fact-finding investigators on Delphi. So I believe it was intentional. I'll probably never be able to prove that, but that is my personal opinion. So here we are in February. Jason and I have this meeting with Brad and Andy and Matt. We go to the bridge. Andy tells me I have this innocent client. And I said, listen, I'm going to be really, really direct with you. Chris and I are victims advocates. And just because I am a PI doesn't mean I'm going to jump in and defend somebody accused of taking the lives of 2 tender age children. That's not who we are. It goes against everything we believe in. And Andy said, but I genuinely believe this man is innocent. And I said, well, do me a favor and give me 2 weeks. Let me look into this a little bit further. And if I am comfortable with believing that Rick Allen may not be the offender here, then I will come back and let you know that. It took me about 2 days of doing the research.
Okay, I have a couple questions for you. So when you met them out there on the trails and the bridge that first time, number one, I want to know where all you went. Like, did you go across the bridge to the south end? Did you, before you crossed the bridge, did you go off to the left and go over like towards the ridge to go down to the crime scene? And you said it took you 2 days. What is it that you seen during those 2 days that convinced you of Rick's innocence?
So, okay, let me answer your first question, which is where all we went that day. I drove down to Delphi from Michigan City and met the guys. They were already, when I got into Delphi, Jason, Andy, Brad, and Matt were already, they were walking up from the crime scene back to the cemetery. I parked at the cemetery and they came walking up and I was like, hey, you guys went to the crime scene without me, you know, kind of thing. And they're like, oh, you'll be back there 1,000 times. And I said, okay, that's fair. So then we drove from the cemetery back over to that, I guess that's a newer parking lot, that parking area. And then we walked from that parking area where all the new stuff is. And we walked that trail, that entire trail. So I guess it would be, you know, to the north end of that bridge. And I am extremely afraid of heights. So there was no getting me over that gate that day. Jason did jump, you know, he jumped that gate because all PIs take what's called a go bag with them. We all have a bag that usually has video cameras, batteries, you know, thumb drives, stuff like that. Well, one of the things that I carry in my bag is a measuring tape. And Jason had asked me if I had a measuring tape with me. And I said, yeah. And that's when Jason and Brad jumped over the gate and they kind of started doing some measuring. That's when they were trying to, I think, decipher whether or not Rick could have been bridge guy based on height. And I kind of stood back with Andy and Matt and we talked more about kind of the case related stuff. Jason and Brad, you know, they worked on the math stuff and then we were all kind of standing back there just talking about what our roles would involve, what we would be required to do. It was my first time working on a trial from the inside. I'm normally the gal that puts the reports together, finds the facts, hands it over to a prosecutor, and then they, you know, they go from there. So this is a very different animal for me. So I had a lot of questions that day. One of the things that really sold me initially was Andy Baldwin's sincerity. And I will say that until the day I die. Angie looked me in the eye very specifically and said, I believe I have an innocent client and nothing scares me more than that. And I said, you got to give me 2 weeks. And I told him during that encounter, I said, if Chris and I said, if I come onto this, I would want I call Chris my partner in anti-crime. I said, so if I were to come on, I would have to have Chrissy with me. She's my partner in anti-crime. We do all of this together and we kind of share a brain on it. So You know, Chris is the autopsy gal. She's the medicine and the chemistry and the bio. I am the timelines and the names and pattern recognition and the memorizing of dates and times. That's kind of my forte. So we work so well together. It's a very fluid team. And at any rate, I had said to Andy, you know, give me 2 weeks. Well, what I did is I went back that night and I called Chris and I said, this is what is going on. I've told them that I won't do this unless you're on board with me. And now we have to decide if we're willing to put our reputations on the line because we are victims advocates and pro-victim PIs who are being asked to work for the other side. And this is just not who we are. And so what we started doing was looking at the earlier press reports. You know, I've done a lot of appearances on court TV. I think at last count, it was like over 200. And so of course I went, you know, to Barb's reporting and stuff like that. Now I had just wrapped up the Haley Dunn case. Sean Atkins had just been arrested. And there was an element to our investigation of that case that involved ritualistic crimes or ritualistic efforts. So I'm looking at this news coverage going, oh my God, this sounds so familiar. Like we've been there, we've done this, you know. Chris, we really may be able to help here. And it just seemed from what little we were able to look at in those first 2 days that Rick Allen did not meet the profile for someone who would have done this. And so I called Andy back, or I called Jason back, and I said, yeah, I'm in. I'm in. I don't think he did this. I said, but my bigger concern is that I don't think this case is even remotely solved. I said, that's my bigger worry. And if they got the wrong guy, which I already suspect they do, then we still have dangerous predators out there and nobody knows it. And so we agreed. I called Jason and said, yes, I'm in. You know, Chris has to be on board with me because I need her brain on this. And Jason said, that's fine. We opened the office in Michigan City. We signed the initial contract with, Jason sent us the contracts, and then I believe Andy sent the original email to Jason, which I have, saying that they wanted to hire Jensen on the case. And then I believe Brad, being lead attorney, was in charge of our contracts. So then what happened was a few months into this, we had this stall between February and June where we couldn't investigate because our licensing hadn't been approved yet by the state. So we felt like we were in this real holding pattern. And Chris and I talk sometimes for hours a day. So everything is strategy. How can we expedite this to get up to speed as quickly as possible? Because this case is now years old and we are just now throwing ourselves into the thick of it. And I said, I'll go with the press reports. And she goes, I'll go with the YouTubers. So I took all of like the media, the mainstream media reporting. Chrissy took the YouTubes, and we would then get on the horn every night and compare notes. And this is what I found. Oh, crud, we got to write this down. But we were so anxious for that licensing to be approved. In the meantime, we had been working already very aggressively in Michigan City to identify all of the unsolved crimes that were from my hometown, because there are many. And Chris and I have worked on some of those, as advocates and reporters throughout the years. And we were really frustrated that no movement had been done on those cases. So we were running some pages. One of them was for a friend of mine, Tara Stevens, who had been hit and killed in Michigan City, I believe it's 2019. And
that case was supposed to be that case was supposed to have been by a intoxicated law enforcement officer, correct?
No. No. There's a lot of confusion about that one. I have to be careful at the moment what I say because that is the first time law enforcement came after me. But I believe they came after me knowing that we were in the process of being approved for the licensing. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. That actually, those charges hit after the licensing. So they kind of waited and made sure that, let's embarrass her 100% and wait till she's running an agency and then we'll hit her with some charges. That case, a witness came forward. There was some information given about a particular name. I gave that name publicly. Nobody said anything. I interviewed that man, and then I sent him a text message that people didn't like. And suddenly his permissions for me to reach out to him and talk to him were suddenly revoked. And I was hit with a charge for sending him a text message.
Was he?
That's all. No, he has a lot of friends in law enforcement. I'll say that. But where I really made a mistake in that case was saying something out loud, essentially saying something on a Facebook page that ended up having an uncanny connection to what we learned years later about Delphi. Now, let me be very clear. I have never believed that those two cases are connected in terms of players or even in terms of, I can't say law enforcement, but what I can say is that when you find rumors abound in one state, 90 miles apart, discussing meth distribution, and then that the forms of distribution are identical, such as the moving and transporting of methamphetamines using cattle and hogs. That rumor should have never come up in two separate cases, 90 miles apart, yet there we were. And I made the mistake of saying that out loud to the Michigan City community, and it went so far over people's heads because they didn't realize what I was trying to say, and I was trying to be careful. When people accuse me of being vague, it's not that I'm vague or cryptic. It's that I am trying to be careful to not hurt a victim, to not hurt a family, to not hurt the investigation. I am always thinking from these different roles of, I've been a PI, I'm a PI, I'm an advocate, I'm an investigative reporter. I have to consider all of the variables as I'm speaking. And so when I made those statements about cattle and hogs and meth, I pissed some people off in Michigan City. And then I find years later that the exact same rumor has come up in Delphi. And I'm going, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. How is this even plausible? Well, meth is a statewide problem. That's how it's plausible. Distributions might use the same networks even. I'm not saying they do, but processes are similar. It's like if I were to leave one radio station and go work at another radio station, the process on how a sales call and a sale works are identical. It doesn't matter if I'm working in South Bend or Columbus, Ohio, the processes are identical. So when you talk about distributing methamphetamines using sheep and cattle and hog, and that rumor's coming up in Michigan City, and then it's also coming up down in Delphi, I just spoke out too soon and accidentally alienated people. And that's all it took for anyone who had an issue with me to then run with it and say, she's an idiot. She doesn't know what she's talking about. No, I knew exactly what I was talking about. I just didn't convey it properly or step back and communicate it effectively enough. That tends to happen when you're grieving the loss of 3 people in your family in a 45-day period. When you're trying to rebound from an unexpected death of a young person in your family, there was all of this stuff going on, and I'm just trying to help and do my job. And it was just too much. And I think I said too much too soon. And when I did that, it gave people the opening to say I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Does that make sense?
It does. Other than the fact that I don't think that no matter what time of day, year, night, whatever, I don't think it matters when you would have said it. No one's going to admit it.
That's the other thing.
No
We
one's
all know
going.
what's happening.
Mhm.
Nobody wants to do anything about it.
Well, they want everybody to pretend like we don't see or have knowledge of what's running in and out of the state over the course of like the last decade. And it all has tentacles that touch people in power, and they never seem to suffer any consequences whatsoever.
No, they do not. And I cannot stress enough, for those of you who were in the courtroom, the day that Jerry Holman testified, I don't know if you saw it, or heard it, because it was, I think to the people who caught it, it was shocking. Jerry Holman, when he was testifying and they asked him for his credentials, and he talked about running Indiana State Police at this post and that post, Jerry Holman sought me out in the courtroom, looked me straight in the eye and said, "And lol," with a big smile on his face. Now, what you did not see, because Jerry actually testified very late in the day on that one, I believe. What you did not see was me leave that courthouse sobbing. And the next few hours that transpired between myself and Christine and Bob, where I was a mess. And I said, "Chrissy, oh my God, it's Holman." And she just looked at me and she said, "Oh." Now, what I meant by that is that, as I had shared with you, and I know that you have the information, our agency license was approved by the state on June 22nd of 2023. We opened the agency the morning of June 23rd, officially as an agency. That morning, Indiana State Police went out and put out a Facebook post telling the entire state not to trust us.
Is that what I have?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, that Facebook post. Yes. They posted that the morning after our agency license was approved. And if you go to that thing is still up there on ISP Lowell's page. They have limited the comments, but what you did not see were the hundreds of comments from people from Michigan City saying, "Yeah, Erica Morse is a fraud. You're absolutely right." They didn't even have to say our names. They said Michigan City. They talked about cold cases. Nobody else in Michigan City deals with cold cases but Chris and I. They threw that gauntlet down the morning we started setting up interviews for fact-finding for Delphi. And Jerry Holman had the audacity to get on that stand, look me square in the eye, and brag that he oversees the Lowell Post. The reason that it upset me so greatly was because I asked Indiana State Police to take that down. I told them we were a licensed agency in Indiana and that they were harming our reputation with that post. And that is when their PIO, their public information officer, Glenn Fifield, posted in the comments section, it's now been removed, I'm sure, that he made that post, he authored that post, he did so with authorization, and it wasn't coming down. And it was that moment in the courtroom that Holman looked me in the eye and smiled. Y'all, some people saw him blowing kisses at me and smiling at me and winking at me, and quite frankly, just terrorizing me very subtly during. And that was the night that I put it all together and I said, oh my God. From my perspective, Jerry Holman was the one instructing Indiana State Police to tell their friends at Michigan City Police to shut down Erica and Christine. Because I'm going to tell you, anybody who enjoys doxing is welcome to go to my case right now. I don't care. Go to my case and pull me up. And what you're going to see is that I didn't start amassing an actual criminal record until October of 2023. But 3 months, 4 months after we became fact finders on Delphi. And now all of a sudden, I am a 50-year-old woman being charged left and right. I have lost my home over this case. I don't even want to get into that right now because that's a whole other long story. But I know because I have been told by people that they have been instructed to run me out of Michigan City, to run me out of Indiana, because as it was told to me, I don't know what you did when you got yourself into this Delphi mess, but you have pissed off every cop in this state, and you need to go. That is what I'm dealing with, people. That I am fierce. I do not back down from corruption. I do not back down from dirty cops. And as a result, my reputation, my life, my family, and all of it has been destroyed. And guess what? I guess that's all the proof we need, isn't it? Because
Well, yeah.
why go after, right?
That was their whole intention. And I think to a certain degree, unless you come out and speak like you are, people are they're left with their own thoughts and their own opinions without any kind of clarification. And I know even last week when Chris came on, I had some people who were like, wait, what side of the fence are they on now? And I knew from day one, like I have spoken to both of you women behind the scenes several times, and never once have you guys ever said or handed over information that you shouldn't. I have, don't get me wrong, I've tried. So I think that you coming out tonight, and I know a lot of people in the chat are like, let's get on with it. Let's get to the Delphi. But this is Delphi. All of this discussion is Delphi, and why it's so important that everyone understands how far law enforcement is willing to go to change the narrative, to stop the truth from coming out, whatever the truth may be. And then you have to ask yourself, why?
Absolutely. Sorry, I cut my cam for just a couple minutes. I'm a smoker, and but I didn't. That was when I say the impossible situation. When I have been saying just in the past few days that Chris and I have been put in an impossible situation, that is what I mean. I had 15 cops show up on my doorstep in May of last year at 8:15 on a Friday night. Chris and I were on the phone together. Thank God. Thank God. I get a knock at my door. I open the door, and there are 15 police officers with guns on my doorstep, telling me that they had just received a 911 call that I was out waving a gun around the neighborhood, threatening people's lives.
So you were being swatted?
Yes, ma'am. I pointed to the flock camera that was 25 feet away from my front door and said, I will stand here right now and wait while you check that thing, because you will not find me waving anything around. Now, what makes it worse is when I went to the police station to try to get a copy of that report, the records person, who happens to be married to a chief of police in our area, told me there is no report. There was no incident. There is no record of any call to my house on that day. Yet, if you go to the Michigan City groups from May of 2024, there is a thread discussing 15 officers showing up on my doorstep. They are hiding police reports. They are destroying evidence. And I don't give a flying fig which one of these cops gets mad at me tonight for saying it, because they already have a problem with me. If anybody's going to be the proverbial scapegoat in this, I guess it should be the person whose life has already been destroyed.
Thank you, Kay Jones. So with all of that being said, Erica, where do you now, after the trial is over and everybody, I know we have questions already starting in the chat. Guys, I'm going to get to your questions later on. But Erica, will you, right now, as far as this case goes, in your opinion, first of all, the BG video that just came out, are we looking at the original or are we looking at the enhanced? Number two, what is your opinion of the video, what the girls are experiencing or not experiencing at the moment that they are videotaping? And do you think Richard Allen is going to get a new trial?
Okay, let me try to tackle all three of those.
Okay.
The first, go back to that first question again, if you would, because now my brain's on the video. Oh, where does this case, or where
was it? Are we looking at the original or the enhanced version of the videotape?
I'm not sure. That's my honest answer. And the
do you know who released it?
I do not. I know, I can tell you that Chris and I didn't have that video on our hard drive, and we requested it for a long time and we were never able to get access to it. The first time we viewed that video was in the courtroom with everyone else. And we were shown 2 videos. I believe they played it a total of 3 times. I would have to check my trial notes to confirm that, but it seems like they played it. I know they played it videos at least twice, maybe 3 times. And then the jury had asked, we were told that Saturday the jury was in there viewing that video or videos again. So I don't know for certain. I know what Prof said last night, and he has done a lot more digging on the provenance of this and the like the DNS information in terms of the registrar of that website. I had intended to, but you know, with everything going on the last couple days, I hadn't gotten to that research yet. So I have suspicions, but I don't want to throw anybody out there if it's not them. That would be unfair. I just know that a very limited number of people had access to that video. So from my perspective, I would think it would have to be one of them sharing that information. I was astonished that it came out, to be honest. I felt like because of everything that's happened and because of how hard and aggressive ISP has been against me, one of the things that I didn't mention was that when Jason Jensen was still on this case, he called me one day and he's like, I just got a call about you from the FBI. And I'm like, what? And he said, they wanted to know, first of all, if you worked for me. And this was during one of the leak investigations. Well, fortunately, in that leak, we didn't have the evidence that it had been leaked. It wasn't part of our hard drive. So it was like, phew. And that's how it felt again when this BG video came out. So my initial reaction, as well as Chris's, because we discussed it, was thank God that wasn't in our hard drive, because we already anticipate ISP looking at the source of who released that. If it was considered part of the sealed discovery, then I don't want to be the person responsible for releasing that. And, you know, more power to them, or best wishes. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I'm grateful that I don't know.
Really, Erica?
Yes, ma'am.
Really quick, why the question is here in the chat. I'm going to give you the opportunity to address it. Otherwise, if you don't, it'll carry on. So it's on the bottom of the screen. It says, why did you say outright the video didn't come from the defense and wasn't on the hard drive? Numerous people saw your Facebook post. Do you want to address that?
I never said that it didn't come from the defense, because I am not authorized to speak on behalf of Rick Allen's trial lawyers. So what I said was that it was not in our hard drive. I was looking for my. Why did you outright? Could you repeat that question again? I'm having trouble reading it. Could you read that question again, Amy? I'm sorry. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was accidentally muted. I'm so sorry. So she said, why did you say outright the video didn't come from the defense and it wasn't on the hard drive? Numerous people saw your Facebook post.
Great. I'm glad that numerous people saw my Facebook post. That's why I made it public. Let's get that real straight. I said it wasn't on our hard drive. Our meant me and Christine. And that is, I'm so glad that this was brought up, because this particular person seems to have an issue with me and has never met me. That's all I can say. Please do not misconstrue my words, because I do not speak for Rick Allen's trial lawyers. I don't speak for his appellate lawyers. When I speak and I say we, I mean Erica and Christine. That is it. And if someone else infers that I mean the defense team, then that is their interpretation. And that's all I can say. That hard drive, Chris and I had one hard drive. As Chris has clarified, there were many. We were tasked with knowing those tips inside and out. And that was the hard drive that we received.
Okay, so I'm gonna say this to a couple of people in the chat. KO, you says you want to quote the defense says that they don't speak for them. Of course they don't. First of all, the defense has different ethical laws and obligations that they are sworn to versus private investigators. You're here for a reason. and that is to get information that not necessarily the defense team or attorneys can come out and say. So, of course, the defense team will say their private investigators don't speak for them. Please do not be rude and please do not be disrespectful. End of story. Go ahead.
It's okay. I'm used to this. I am literally used to this. I have developed some very thick skin over the years. This is my 15th year working in these types of cases. And I will say that when it comes to the death of tender age children, emotions run extremely high on all sides. So I'm okay with people being aggressive. What I am not okay with is people misquoting me or misunderstanding me without asking for clarification. If I am able to clarify, I will do it. And I will do it without hesitation because I really, truly have nothing to hide.
And I think that a lot of people are at this point. It's almost like with this case that you can get as close to the truth as you want, but people still want to question or theorize or conspiracy theorize everything because the truth is never going to be true enough or accurate enough because of all of the lies and because of all of the shady shit that has gone on. And I mean, since the trial, I've said we have to reset. You have to go back to the beginning. And I don't know how we do that, especially with this video coming out. So moving back to the video, what is your interpretation of the video, what you feel we are watching, whether it is the original or whether it's the enhanced, the girl's voice, what's transpiring in the video? What do you see, knowing what you know from discovery?
What I see and hear, because I think the audio portion of it, you know, I'm a radio person for the most part, like newspaper, radio, and television, but my ear is very, very, very well trained. And so that breath that happens in the beginning when Abby is far too far away to have it been her, it is very clear to me, unless I have lost my mind, that there is someone else closer to Libby than Abby is. It appears very clear to me, but there's so much confusion and so much debate about that. I feel that Libby is somewhat comfortable talking to the person that we can't see. I feel like, you know, Chris and I were talking about this 2 days ago. It almost gave us the impression now, and you have to understand, we've watched this thing and listened to it so many times since it's come out, that maybe they were making a video to show someone or to send to someone that they had intended to meet. I will say, because I said this in a Facebook post the other day, this is why PIs are trained not to alter a single speck of videos, okay? I can't even alter a timestamp. If I make a mistake on a timestamp on a video on surveillance, I am required by law to fill out what's called an affidavit of error. And then I have to explain, like, if I took the video at 3 p.m., but I bumped the time clock when I was changing my clock, and it inadvertently timed it at 3 a.m., I have to file an affidavit, and that has to go in with that video in that file. And the reason for that is because if I ever get called to testify in court, I have to explain why a video says 3 a.m. when it was clearly taken in daylight of 3 p.m. So I am angry. Let me talk as a PI for a second. I am angry that that video was ever allowed in court. Altered evidence, at least in the state of Texas, is not allowed. Manipulated or altered video is not allowed. So the fact that that thing even made it through is very upsetting to me, because if you are not willing to show the original version, in my opinion, and my training tells me, there's a reason. And so when you begin enhancing it, stabilizing it, using programs to fill in gaps, to fill in, where he takes a step, my big answer to you would be, I don't even consider that thing as truthful at all. Because now that, from the moment I learned it was manipulated or altered, to me, it was considered junk evidence, because I wouldn't be allowed to present it in a court of law. So I am very unclear as to why they were. So, but to the content of the video itself, as Abby's walking up, bridge guy is not initially very clear. I went back and watched this with my husband the other night, and I was like, hey, do you see what I see? We had to watch this thing 3 or 4 times. He was like, wait, back that up. And he was like, where'd that guy come from? And you can only see him, like his legs behind Abby for a brief second. And then Dave and I actually counted it out. I was like 9 seconds from when you just see his legs behind her to when he finally makes an appearance in the video. So that in and of itself has caused so much confusion, and it caused me confusion. But I really feel like maybe the down the hill stuff, it just didn't seem, oh God, I have to be so careful, not because I'm worried about saying anything wrong, but because I am so cautious of knowing that these children have loved ones. I didn't hear fear there the way others may have. And go ahead.
So I took when the video first came out, I took 2 or 3 days just to listen to everybody's opinions, watch it for myself, listen to it for myself. And, my big girl job that I have during the day, I have the ability to wear earbuds, and I have 2 different pairs. So I changed it up. And then I finally made the decision, long story short, my past career, I had a lot of connects with people in the music industry, and I sent it off, and I paid to have it enhanced, just the audio, not the video, just the audio. And for 2 or 3 days, like everyone that I talked to on the phone, I was trying, and I don't know if it was because it was what I was told before I ever saw the video about the whole "that be a gun," but initially I heard it. Then when I had it enhanced, I said, that is not what she's saying at all. And then so once I got past the initial transcript of what was being said, then I could kind of get over that and start looking at the video as a whole. And now hearing the guys and then the pause, the down the hill, that to me is a little nefarious. And you can almost say it's not the same person, the guys and the down the hill. It could be, but it could not be. But I'm more curious about when I listen to Reese Davis and some of the things that he has shared, when he says, Ron Logan says he did laps. Why would Ron Logan describe what he's doing out there as laps unless he's possibly going back and forth on the bridge? Then when he says that they were dropped off at the front, and I've asked on lives, I've asked Reed C to clarify, what do you mean dropped off in the front? In the front, what is that? Is that out there by the trailhead? Is if you live with the back of your property facing the bridge, the back of your property, would would the south end of the bridge be considered the front? And then when Michael Osbrook says there is a black sedan seen on the surveillance video before the white van driving into that private drive and then coming back out. And then you've got Julie Melvin pointing out and then you go back and you listen, you go, holy shit, you do hear a car. Do we have somebody being dropped off right there at the south end of the bridge? Is there somebody coming up the south end of down the hill, coming up saying, guys, down the hill? Are the girls walking across the bridge and there's a man who passes them and then turns around and comes back to where they're a little uneasy, but they're not that uneasy because he passed them once and now he's coming back? We have much more fuckery right now than we ever did before we actually laid eyes on this video.
Absolutely. And that is why I'm angry about the way it was released, because it caused so much chaos. Listen, there has been so much mystery to this case already, and we don't need any more. And I commend Prof for saying that last night, because whomever released this, and I don't know who specifically or for certain, whomever did release this, it would have been much more helpful had they been transparent and just said, first of all, which version it is that we are seeing, and second, where it came from. And if people are going to risk getting in trouble for this, then own that risk. The rest of us are owning our risks when we choose to speak out. So that part really bothers me, because it has created so much chaos within all of the community. I agree with you about the potential sound of a vehicle. I have viewed the video in question that you're talking about, the surveillance video. I have seen it. And I will say that I don't want to say something that could be used in an appellate situation. I don't know what their direction is yet. But you are not being misled. I'll say that. You are definitely not being misled on what you're being told on that. I think I'm comfortable saying.
So you're referring to that there is a vehicle that is seen going in the private drive before 2:44. My understanding is it's between 2 p.m. and about 2:10 p.m. The black sedan goes in. Shortly after, it turns around and comes out. We don't know if the girls were put in the vehicle or if somebody was dropped off, like we are being told somebody was dropped off.
I think that is very fair. I think that's an extremely fair assessment on your part. And if somebody were dropped off or if somebody were picked up, clearly we can't tell that from the video that was released. Now, once I started really looking at that video, once it was released, okay, I actually can say this because it wasn't part of discovery. So I felt like two things. First of all, I felt like the girls ended up in a trap, okay? And this is my opinion. So please don't anyone go out and misquote and say that I'm speaking for a team or I'm speaking. No, this is Erica's opinion based on conversations with Chris and 2 years of working this case. I believe it feels to me like the girls were almost trapped, you know, one on one end, one behind them. Ergo, they had no place to go.
So they basically were set up to walk into a trap with no way out.
That's kind of how I feel. And what increases that opinion for me is a conversation that Christine and I had during trial, an interview that we conducted. And I'm going to say this with the disclaimer. What I'm about to say did not come from discovery. It came from a conversation, an interview that Christine and I conducted during the trial that was set up by Bob. And Bob's not part of the defense team. So there's my disclaimer for anyone who tries to claim that Erica's leaking information. It's not happening. That during that interview, we were told that a belt had been found under that bridge. Now, the reason that is significant is because police officers are trained to know that in an abduction situation, you always look for a belt, especially if it is broken. And that is because statistically, when someone comes up to a victim from behind, they grab them by the waist.
Okay. Was this belt that they found? We know that there was a belt found. Was the belt broke?
I don't believe that was ever clarified to us, but I can tell you that others asked about it as well, and no one was ever able to get answers on it. And I trial, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited for someone from the prosecution to bring that up. And it was never brought up, and it angers me. I feel like it wasn't tested. That is my opinion.
Okay, two more questions. What is your opinion about the use of the information that came out about the handcuffs? And do we know for sure if the blonde clump of hair found at the bottom of the down the hill has ever been tested?
Did you say the first thing you said, handcuffs?
Yes. What is your opinion about the discussion of handcuffs that Reese Davis claims he was told from Ron Logan that the girls were handcuffed?
So what I will say is that I saw no evidence in the photos to support that. However, a lot of what Reese has said has been independently looked at over the last couple weeks, and we're getting some really good confirmations about other things. So I don't get stuck on one thing, especially in this type of a situation. When you have someone who's allegedly made a confession to a third party, I have to presume that some of that is going to come back to us inaccurately. So if I hear something that's inaccurate or it doesn't support what I've seen with my own eyes, I don't necessarily then throw out that person's entire narrative. That is unfair. We are all human. Sometimes we just mishear things. Sometimes we fill in the gaps on our own. Sometimes we, sometimes we want to answer. Here's the other thing. When you're asked a question, human nature is you want to provide an answer. So I don't know about the handcuffs. I don't feel comfortable saying anything beyond what I saw in the photos did not support handcuffs, but I could be totally wrong. It just, that's not something that I know enough about, I think, to comfortably say yes or no, yay or nay. Your second question, I was a little bit more excited about because I think I could answer that. So if you could repeat it, I'd love to go there. You had asked about the
Yes, I was asking about the clump of hair that was reportedly found at the bottom of the hill, as if maybe an abduction site, if someone was grabbed by the hair. Is it all blonde hair? How much hair? Was it ever tested? Whatever you can tell us about that.
Chris is the one who discovered that. So I don't want to, how do I say this? I don't know if it was a blonde clump of hair. I know it was a clump of hair. And I know that when I went through the evidence book, the evidence log book that was like, had 803 items, I think it was, I saw no reference to that hair in those pages. If something wasn't in those pages, then it was my understanding that had not been tested. Because that evidence log that we were given included lab reports and results, if that makes sense.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Based on, let me see, let me pull it up here.
Could you please let Streets in? She's backstage.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, Streets.
Hello, everybody.
So based on the, all of the female DNA that was located, or at least the female hair, can you, for example, Sheena Cottrell, either of the Shelbys who were reportedly out there that day, the one that was with Cheyenne, do we have any females that have already been named that have been looked at and cleared in this case, especially when we're looking at this video now where you could lean towards there being a third female voice whispering in the background?
How do I say this? Chris is what I call the DNA expert. She understands it. I've been certified in a little bit of it. I've taken one class in DNA. So the way I understand it is that I don't think any female has been effectively cleared. And I think that was a big mistake. I think that was a mistake on the part of law enforcement during their investigation. That is my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It just appears, based on what I've seen and the conversations I've had with Chris about it, that the focus was on men and that females were not effectively investigated, looked at, tested, or cleared. And if I am misspeaking on any of that, I apologize, but I do believe that is an accurate accurate representation of where that was. Yeah.
So was there any DNA tested about that belonged to the females, or is it just still all being held for better testing to come available?
I don't know if it's being held for better testing to become available or if it just wasn't tested. Let me say this. If anybody who's watching this right now was in the courtroom, then hopefully you heard this as well. When the woman from the lab was on testifying, she made a comment about, well, there was also a green handkerchief, but I didn't bother to test that because I made the decision that that looked too old. Now I'm paraphrasing. That was not her specific quote. And I remember kind of looking at Chris going, since when does the lab decide what's tested and what's not?
Right.
And that that statement ended up being made right before we were set up for this other conversation where we learned about the belt. And then that led me to go to Matt and say, I need to borrow that evidence book for a few days. And like every night when we got out of court, I was just sitting there flipping through page after page after page, looking for specific items to see if there were lab results on those items. And there were a couple of items that I was specifically looking for that I could not find results for in that book. So people can infer what they want from that. I don't know if there were reports that were not given to us. If there were reports that were missed, I don't know what that means, but I can tell you that I looked for specific items and I did not find results for them. I looked for that green handkerchief too, and I was mad about that.
So with all of that being said, and the fact that we know that there is unknown male and unknown multiple female DNA, with that being said, what is your opinion about the geofence? Because, since the trial, Julie Melvin's come out and has informed us that somebody approached her and pointed the finger at Mark Kurtz being involved with Ron Logan. And I know, and I mean, Garrett has admitted in the past that one of his cell phones pinged in the geofence, and I'm not completely sold on it being Garrett out there, but I'm not sold that it wasn't. But anything about Mark Kurtz?
So this is where there we go. Mark Kurtz, that's not a name I have personally investigated. Again, things were divided up. Let me say, I have to put a little bit of a disclaimer on this because the geofence discussion is apparently one that is upsetting some folks. And that is where I got my hand slapped. Like, you can't talk about that because it's in discovery. So what I will say about the geofence is that I don't believe Rick Allen's cell phone was in that geofence. And there were a lot of phones that were, and they're very concerning. And if I name names, I'll probably spend some time behind bars again. And the geofencing situation to me is maddening. And it's maddening because it is so unfair that we are post-conviction, folks, and I am still having to watch my words. This is unfair. We should be able to have open discussions about the evidence because we have a conviction, and it's unfair that I am sitting here worrying about lawsuits and prison time when you all want and deserve answers. I cannot stress enough to you how irritated and frustrated Chris and I are that we can't just sit down and tell you everything we know. I've never seen anything like this.
And why is
so
that? Like, who's, like, is it the court order still? Or?
There listen, I don't believe for a second that Rick did this, okay? And because of that, Christine and I are not done with what we do. We are not actively working for any attorneys involved in this case Today, we did receive some messages from attorneys who have asked us to come back to the table for some debriefing sessions about what we learned, what we know, and what we uncovered. So I am very conscious of that moving forward into the appellate process. And I guess the easiest way for me to convey it is we aren't done because the man who's behind bars didn't do this. So this geofencing information is so sensitive right now. You know, lawsuits and everything else aside, if we say too much right now about the geofencing, it could impact this case and potentially others. And we are victims advocates first and foremost. And when children are taken from this earth wrongfully, we want to make it right for their loved ones. So please do not think I am being evasive on this geofencing. I wish I could tell you all what we are working on, what we have worked on. But there are some very dangerous people out there. They do not play fair, clearly. And I don't want people to know where we're at right now in this, because we're onto some stuff that people don't realize, and I'm not willing to risk that for any one of these victims, including Libby and Abby. And I hope that everyone can appreciate that as not being evasive, but being committed to actually seeking the truth.
So we will change the subject from the geofencing. Can I ask you if we, as creators, researchers, if we have the trail of a bloodhound on an organization known as CASA, are we out of bounds?
CASA in terms of court-appointed special advocate?
Yes.
I want to make sure I'm
understanding. Something in
understanding.
this investigation of CASA.
Hold on, there was some garble there. I only heard part of your question.
I know. I'm driving in the middle of the Mojave Desert. I'm so sorry.
Hold
It's
on.
okay.
Okay. So, for example, you have the CPS building being shut down. You have someone like Judge Fouts, who initiated the appointing of the CASA organization into Carroll County and White County. And you have the law in Indiana that does not cover children that are mistreated or mishandled in the CPS system in Indiana. They cannot, at a later time, hold Indiana accountable. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does. So the question itself, like I had said, was a little garbled. You had asked, do you think that, are you asking me if I think that there's an issue with CASA in Carroll County?
I think what I'm asking is, are we on the right track or the wrong track? If we're looking at, when you're looking at a child pornography ring, the largest that the Indiana state has ever seen, that just completely drops off the face of the earth and nothing is ever discussed about it. And then you've got a child predator who's supposedly in contact with Abby and Libby. And now he's in prison for X amount of years for those same issues. Yet we've never heard anything about who was in the Dropbox, who had access to the Dropbox, who was purchasing folders in the Dropbox. And you've got all of these corrupt judges and prosecutors and attorneys now involved in CASA, the Child Protective Services advocates for the children who are the victims of said crimes. Who are we protecting?
In that regard, I think your bloodhound senses are extremely astute.
You hear that, Street? Do you hear that, Street?
That's me. I'm the bloodhound.
We have a huge problem in Indiana with CSAM being swept under the rug. And I will go so far as to say, as someone who has worked as a PI in other states and on cases involving CSAM on multiple electronic devices, that when things are brushed under the rug, it is because there are people involved who have the ability and authority to push that under the rug. And I will say that just like the meth problem we were discussing earlier, that is a problem that is extremely prevalent as well in LaPorte County, where Chris and I live, up in Michigan City area. And when the sharing of these materials is done, it is not necessarily done in a small radius. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Meaning, I do believe you're onto something when you say that this is a larger network. 100%. This is my 15th year of doing this, and CSAM is probably the most cancerous spread I've ever seen. These images and these materials are floating too quickly. There are too many of them. There are not enough arrests to support the amount of material that is out there. And it has to make people question why these arrests are not taking place. Yes, yes, absolutely.
I know that I sound horrible, but do you think that some of the evidence uncovered leaves people open for liability and lawsuits?
I don't know what the statute of limitations are on these situations. I am finding that Indiana is not kind to the victims when it comes to statutes of limitations. It seems very unbalanced. So I don't know if victims who were abused or exploited 10 years ago have the ability to come back now and seek relief through the court system. That would be a great question for one of the lawyers.
Indiana has a class action lawsuit.
Does it?
Yeah, for 9 people are representing 11,000 mistreated foster children in the state of India. I sent case by case. I sent her a YouTube clip of a news story, and I sent her a couple of newspaper from the Indiana Courier Journal and like a couple of other newspapers. Indiana is under very deep investigations right now concerning DCFS, CPS, and CASA.
That's music to my ears. I mean, I didn't know that. Holy cow. What a great piece of information to learn. I can't wait to talk to Chris about it because I don't know if y'all know, but Chris actually used to be a CASA. I mean, and I think she still does CASA work, but up here in the northern part of the state. So she really is the expert when it comes to CASA, CPS, all of that. But wow, it's about time. That's what I can say. And I've worked with CPS when I worked in the shelter system. I've worked with them on and off for years. I've had good experiences. I've had bad experiences. And I guess that's all I can say about that.
Well, here, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to play real quick one of these news articles.
In a federal lawsuit against the Indiana Department of Child Services.
The lawsuit says the state is failing to protect children, and the current director is the greatest threat to the agency and child welfare. We first told you about this yesterday. Now our investigative reporter, Richard Essex, has been digging deeper into what's in the lawsuit.
This federal complaint outlines the abuse of 9 children while in the care of DCS. The lawyers say that the state's foster care program is in crisis, and the actions and inactions of the state make Indiana a dangerous place for kids. The 66-page federal lawsuit lays out a long list of allegations of failures by the Indiana Department of Child Services. The lawyers wrote, Indiana is failing in its most fundamental duty as custodian in keeping foster children safe and healthy. Marsha Lowry, the executive director and lawyer for A Better Childhood. According to the website, a not-for-profit advocacy organization that uses the courts to reform dysfunctional child welfare systems around the country. Her organization is spearheading the complaint. She says the current director of DCS, Eric Miller, is at the center of their concern.
The outgoing commissioner said the children are going to die because this person had taken over the system. This person's now been appointed by the governor to run the child welfare system. And children in the system are in really serious trouble.
Governor Holcomb appointed Miller to the position as DCS director 3 months ago.
So
Governor
that's
Holcomb
part of it.
appointed Stouts too to judge. Governor Holcomb, he's the one who appointed Jouts to judgeship in Carroll County.
People, let's keep it nice in the chat, please, or I will start timing people out.
So what I will say about that, if you want to explore this particular subject further, I have the perfect person for you to have on. And that is, God, her name is escaping me at the moment, but I can see her face. She was Judah's aunt. If you're familiar with Justice for Judah, out of this area, northern Indiana. Judah was a young boy who was taken from his parents and put back or given to a family member, a relative who agreed to raise him. And then the DCS came in and removed Judah from that family and put him back with his biological parents, and he ended up deceased. So she has been leading this charge for this federal suit. And if you would like to explore this further, I will put you in contact with her tomorrow. Because you two really should talk.
Okay.
Full disclosure, I grew up in foster care, and I have a lot of I went into foster care when I was 5. I aged out when I was 18 and joined the military because not really any other choices there. But so I had a lot of horrific things happen to me in the foster care system. So that is something that it's close to my heart.
So, Erica, there's a question for you in the chat from Criminality. She wants to know who is telling you that you guys cannot talk? Where is that threat coming from? Because she believes that legally you should be allowed to speak if you want to.
I believe we should be allowed to speak at this point as well. So I have to be so careful here, you guys. And I believe is it Teresa from Criminality? Is that correct?
Yes.
I really love her work. So I just want her to know that. I absolutely love her analytics and her graphs. I think you're phenomenal. I don't want to name names because I was told last week that action could ensue if I do. But what is happening, I think, is that there were NDAs that were in play. And Christine and I both very specifically asked to be let out of those NDAs. We were both told that we could speak. And then all of a sudden, that seems to be reversing. So we have both spoken out now for a couple months. And then all of a sudden, last week, there was a conversation, you know, if you do this again, there could be action. And that is when I pushed back harder than I have ever pushed back before. And I challenged it. And then I contacted an outside attorney. And I was told that based on the circumstances of us not receiving pay for this case, even though we were invoicing and we had a contract with set rates, that if somebody breaches their contract on that end, that the NDAs are automatically breached as well. And I think that's the answer I'm comfortable giving.
You gotta pay to play. Is it me? Is everybody go quiet?
No, it's me.
Okay.
Did we lose Erica?
I think we lost Erica. She's going through a
back.
storm now, right?
Yeah.
I'm almost home.
She's back. I was addressing Exotic Prairie in the chat about the True Detective and the antlers. I don't see antlers. Listen, and I'm the most like I'm very opinionated, but at the same time, I'm very realistic. And in this case, above anything else, I am open to opinions and I'm open to other people's perceptions simply because it is open-ended. And I don't think that we have, I still think that there are pieces to this puzzle that are missing, clearly. And until we, and I feel like it's going to, I feel like it's going to take one or two things for everything to just kind of click. But I don't know what that is. And I think it also can take one or two things to make this whole entire case do a complete left turn, Clyde, because there are so many different facets to this case that could be real. So, and I know that a lot of people in the chat want Erica to come out and spill her guts and tell it all. But guys, she just can't do that at the moment. And look at what's happened. Look at what has happened in this case and the control law enforcement has. I mean, you have to understand that there are some things and there are some risks that are not worth taking.
So here's, I guess the best way I can say it is I will be of no use to Rick Allen if I am 6 feet under. And it's not that I'm afraid for me. because I've accepted whatever fate comes my way. I knew the risks 15 years ago when I got into this work, that I'm dealing with killers and killers who want to keep secrets quiet. So this is not my first rodeo going up against dangerous people. It's not my second, it's not my third, it's not even my first rodeo going up against, potentially neo-Nazis. None of that. None of this is new to me. None of this is new to Chris. I cannot stress to you enough how hard it is to go to sleep at night knowing where Rick is. I cannot tell you how difficult it is to sit with Kathy and watch her losing her mind because she can't see her husband, because he's in solitary again and nobody knows why. These are people who were living their lives, and one day the police showed up, separated them, used an extremely unfair interrogation tactic on two people who had never been in trouble in their lives. And now their world is completely destroyed. I am a victim's advocate first and foremost because I believe that every victim deserves a voice. And Kathy and Rick are the most collateral living damage of this entire situation. And so, whereas people think I might be evasive, I'm not. I have trouble sleeping at night knowing where Rick is. This is so unfair, you guys. He is a good man. Let me tell you something. The first time I talked to Rick, I said something to him and he responded. And I just kind of looked at him real funny. And he goes, "What?" And I said, "That's not your voice." He goes, "I know. It's not." This man does not deserve to be where he is. And I am sure that come tomorrow, my life is going to be worse than it is today because of what I'm saying. But damn it, we don't put innocent people behind bars just to shut a community up. This is the worst case of intimidation, retaliation, control, manipulation, and destruction to innocent lives that I have ever seen in my 15 years of advocacy, my 7 years of being a PI, and my 35 years of being an investigative reporter investigating police corruption in the Hoosier State. This is the worst example I have ever seen.
Erica, let me ask you this. Do you truly believe that this case, it's three-prong question. Police corruption, child trafficking, whether it be porn, C-SPAN, or drugs. Are we dealing with all three in this case, or one more so than the other?
I think we're definitely dealing with two. This is my opinion based on what I have seen, what I have read, and what I have heard from interviews. I am completely convinced. Yes, the drug trafficking 100% plays a role in this situation. Child trafficking, I'm unclear. at this moment because I don't, but the C.
The C-STAM stuff, I guess, I mean, to me, it's all the same. It's really all the same.
Yeah. I define child trafficking as moving someone from one place to another. So if we're talking in terms of exploitation, oh, absolutely, 100%. And again, I'll probably face retaliation for saying that. I really don't care. Rick is not walking out of there until some of us get brave. And Prof got me a little brave last night. So I think that there are people who are in positions of authority who have broken the law. I think that there are people in positions of authority who have relationships in other organizations that have created a conflict of interest. I think we have a prosecutor who was a criminal defense attorney for a very long time.
Bingo. Bingo.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
He should have recused himself immediately, in my opinion. Immediately. If that had happened, we may not even have any of these conversations. Because a third party defense may have been allowed. Well, hell, if we had a different prosecutor, Rick may have never been arrested.
I have a question. When Nick McClellan came into office, he had some sort of press conference or something where he was like, I'm in charge now. All information comes through me. Is that normal for a prosecutor to run an investigation before the charges have even been brought to him? Because, like, technically, he's not there unless they're charging someone, right?
Experience has been that prosecutors are hands off until charges are filed. As a PI, I was never allowed to directly speak with a prosecutor about a case. I was always instructed from a hierarchy standpoint that I was to go through the DA's investigator or the police department, and then they would take that information or evidence to a prosecutor. So to have a prosecutor say everything goes through me, that was a shocker to me because that's not the general hierarchy that I as a PI am accustomed to seeing.
It's like up to the detectives, and then when the detectives feel like they have a suspect, they bring their case to the prosecutor through the PCA, right? And then that's when the prosecutor takes the PCA to the judge, right? That's how that works. I watch Law and Order. Is that how that works?
Generally, yes. The police, yes, the police gather the evidence and they submit a report or go to the prosecutor and say, well, you know what, let me give an example. I met with a police officer last year. It was about a violation of a restraining order. I have a restraining order against a man who violated it, oh my God, well over 100 times. I took all of my evidence to the police department. The police department then submitted that evidence and a request for an arrest warrant. Of course, it wasn't issued because it's me and I don't deserve protection in the state of Indiana, don't you know? But that is the system that was literally in front of me less than a year ago. The police officer took that information to the prosecutor And then apparently the prosecutor declined to move forward. But yes, that is the hierarchy that exists in every department that I have worked with over the years. So that really was, I think, kind of, whoa, where'd that come from? I don't like it.
Do you think
Go
Nick
ahead.
was sent in to take control of the case to do exactly what he did, which is only to get a case and still not have to give out any information? Somehow he got a conviction without giving out any information at trial. I've never seen that before.
You guys, I wish you could have been in that courtroom. I was a court reporter for years. And so I've sat through a lot. What I saw was very abnormal. Extremely abnormal.
It's almost like Children of the Corn.
That's a great analogy.
Like,
I mean, I think
Nick is that creepy little kid that like grew up and now he's the town prosecutor. You know
I
what
think
I mean?
that's,
And he's covering up all the secrets from all the other little corn children. I'm sorry.
let me give you an example. So we were tasked with looking into a particular group of people at one point.
Can you say who that group of people were?
I'm trying to figure out if I want to get killed tonight. There was a group of men. I know that this is, you guys have discussed this. There were people who were in court the day the girls were abducted, that had some connections to one of the victims' families. And I think anybody who's followed this might be picking up what I'm putting down. So there we go. So I was tasked one weekend with looking into these particular individuals. And what I found in the docket was driving me insane. First of all, our prosecutor's name was showing up as a defense attorney. Then halfway through, our defense attorney showed up as the prosecutor. And then when we started looking for the records, those 4 cases represented or had listings in there or entries in there about the records being destroyed. So, you know, I went to college for journalism, all right? I didn't go for criminal justice. I was the editor of the Purdue newspaper my junior and senior year at the Purdue campus in Westville, PNC. My entire training is that of an investigative reporter. So when we're talking First Amendment, freedom of speech, FOIAs, things like that, I've never seen a situation where docket after docket after docket says records destroyed. Records destroyed. It was to the point where on that particular weekend, Chris and I were about beating our heads against the wall going, how are we going to find this information? Like, it's gone. How do you just destroy shit and get away with it? And it was record after record, person after person, player after player. So this one got smart. And one of the people involved is now deceased. So I called his attorney and I said, your client is deceased. Can I have the records from that case, please? And he said, sure. So we were able to get the PCA from that case, which ended up leading us straight back to a fire in New Mexico.
Oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And one of the people who died in that event had been charged with CSAM.
Is it the J one, the one with the last name that starts with a J?
The female.
Is it the really? Oh, the MC.
Bingo.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And that's, I will tell you, before I went on tonight, Chris and I had a very long conversation. And I said, if it didn't come from Discovery, as far as I'm concerned, it's on the table. That's how I feel. Because I've been gagged and told you can't discuss anything that you saw in those files. Okay, fine. But if I got it third party and it didn't come from that hard drive, it's fair game as far as I'm concerned. Because guess what? You guys are all out there spending your time, every single one of you creators, every night, every day. And these audiences and followers and members and subscribers, every single one of us is invested. And there is nothing that Chris and I hate more than what we call the I know something you don't know game. We put our pants on one leg at a time, just like everyone else. And I am about collaboration. So this situation has been extremely maddening because there is nothing I want more than to be able to sit down in a room with thousands of you, roll up our sleeves, say, this is exactly what we know and where we're at, and we need your help to get to the finish line. And if we do that, we go to jail. This is so unfair to us.
Well, and Erica, it's so unfair to an innocent person who's being charged. It's so unfair for that. And, you know, I've been dealing with this for 2 years in Ashley's case, where the whole I know something you don't know, people dropping hints, people giving tidbits of information. And then it's almost like they have a second thought and then they're afraid. They're afraid their lives are going to be taken. They're afraid that someone's going to find out they were a snitch. And I don't think that people, for one, I don't think that some people even really care the threat that you're facing, number one. Number two, there's the legal system doesn't always work the way that we want it to. But in a situation like this, it should work at least 50% in the favor of you are innocent until proven guilty. And everybody involved has an obligation and a duty to the truth.
I could not agree more. You know, something I heard, Prof said it last night. I don't know if it's true. Well, I do know it's true because it has been said to me at one point. But that comment about we can either seek the truth or we can get Rick Allen out of prison, that is so maddening to me.
So so a lot of people in the chat want to know who are we up against? Is it the prosecutor? Is it ISP? Is it both of them? Are we like legitimately having to solve this case ourselves and get a confession before we can save Rick's life and get him out of prison?
I don't think we'll ever get a confession. I am extremely encouraged over the last 48 hours with some new information that Christine and I have stumbled on about voices. You know, we got our hands on some samples that we've been real anxious to get to so that we could try to compare them to Bridge Guy. And just like you know, I have all these radio contacts. If I'm about to start, you know, sending stuff to my people and say, hey, enhance this because, you know, I need to hear this very clearly. But here's what we're up. This is my opinion, okay? But I think that it is a fair opinion for more than just me. When the Franks memo came out, the trial lawyers took so much shit. Because if you're not invested in the Delphi case from day one and you're just reading that in the news, that Franks memo sounds like the most ludicrous thing anybody's ever seen. But it didn't come from the defense team. It didn't come from the trial lawyers. It didn't come from any investigators. It came from the initial investigation, and it came from the FBI. So I think that the backlash and the mocking and the crude response of that memo being filed may have caused people to take a step back and ask themselves, can we get the world to understand? And let me say this, not the world. Can we get a jury to make sense of this? If the public is responding in this manner, how is a jury going to respond? So is it then easier to find an alternate explanation that may not necessarily be 100% accurate, but is a hell of a lot easier for people to swallow than some crazy cult theory involving people with literally no scruples who will not hesitate to take someone out?
Look at how many people have already died. Why do
Bingo.
I sound like that? I mean, it's the peripheral deaths in this case are worse than the peripheral deaths in JFK's case. I mean, it's insane. Even the chick who called the cops at 2 a.m. to report a scream is dead. Like, what the hell?
Bingo. And
When
the
you
ones
know-
who are still breathing are a lot of the people who are still breathing have now amassed criminal histories, their criminal charges, criminal records. We've had civil cases. There was one day last year in October, I kid you not, where I had the same process server on my door 5 straight days in a row. And the 4th day, when I just opened the door and stuck my hand out, like, just give me the damn piece of paper. And he goes, hold on a second. And I said, what? And he goes, I don't know who in the hell you pissed off, but they aren't going to stop until you are done. I said, I know. And he's like,
how deep do you think this goes?
I'm sorry?
How deep do you think this goes? Like Governor Holcomb?
No, I don't. You have to understand the historicals of Indiana law enforcement to understand how deep this goes. So I'm going to try to give a quick Cliff Notes version. Back in the late 1970s to early 1980s, there were some deals that were struck between some people in Mexico and some police chiefs throughout the Midwest. Those deals allowed for a lot of stuff to be brought in while people looked the other way. A few of those individuals were caught and arrested and imprisoned, and many others were not. And those people who may have worked at a lower level back then are now in charge of the entire state as it pertains to who gets arrested, who gets prosecuted, and who gets convicted.
Cocaine or meth?
Both.
I'm going to go out and come back in because my mic sucks. Okay. Okay.
Erica, Catastrophe has a question. Can you read it on the screen? I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I can read it for you. Did you misspeak on court TV? You said Shane Meehan killed Ferenczi in May after the Odin report was submitted. When was he actually killed? In July, or are we off on the public info? Oh.
I don't know if she heard me. Thank you for asking that question because I have to clear this up. I don't know if you guys saw my demeanor that night. I was physically shaking. I had been silenced for 2 years. And Vinny and I had been talking for a while about the moment the sentencing was over, I was coming on. And in that moment, I misspoke and I got that month wrong. I confused it with something I had read in Discovery, a report of Greg's. And I just got those dates confused. I got annihilated the next morning in text messages and was told that I was hurting Rick. And I went out and actually made a public statement. I don't do a whole bunch of social media platforms. I'm pretty much Facebook. Even though apparently others think I'm everywhere, I'm not. And I mentioned that I misspoke and that I was horribly sorry for that mistake. I'm human. I was shaking like a leaf that night. I've been on court TV, I think it's like well over 200 times. That was the only time I was ever in fear for my life. When somebody gets up on network television and starts talking about the killing of a federal agent, when so many people didn't know about this, I am human. I made a mistake, and I am so terribly sorry for that. And thank you for asking that question because it was not May. It was not right away. I do believe it was July. If that is what the records say, then that is what occurred. Because I went back that night like I was in tears going, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I made that mistake. Because then I followed it up by saying he'd been convicted. I had just read an article that had said that the article that I had read had not alluded to him being put into a psych eval or anything like that. So just to be honest, I think I read it through tears and I got it wrong. And I owe it to people to say if I get something wrong. I'm 50 years old, and if I make a mistake, I make a mistake, I gotta own it and I gotta move on. Because I am so set on getting it right. And that mistake carried with me for a long time. And I asked Vinny just to hold off on having me on till I could kind of regain myself because, you know, Christine has mentioned it so many times, you guys. What you see in this Delphi world of crazy and gang stalking and all of this stuff, this has been happening to me for 14 years, okay? I have pissed off people on another case. And this case, the Haley Dunn case out of Texas, it also involves CSAM. It also involves police corruption. It also involves the disorganization of discovery, missing reports, missing evidence, evidence that is being guarded in a locker 24/7 so others can't get to it. I am in constant fear. Anytime I appear, I am in fear. Because there are people in the Haley Dunn case who do not want me breathing. And it has taken a lot of time for me to be strong enough to stand up and talk about Delphi, because every time I speak, I am terrorized. And if you had seen me 5 years ago, what I was enduring in that Haley Dunn case when we were still living in Texas, you would be like, oh my God, this woman is a nightmare. Like, I was looking over my shoulder every minute of every day. The crazy that you see in this case, the stalking, the doxing, the harassing. I've been fired from at least 8 jobs over the last 14 years, not because of performance, but because my bosses were extorted. They were told, essentially, we will destroy your company or you can terminate Erica. It's like I don't have the right to work anymore. It's like I don't have the right to survive. I don't have the right to feed my family or pay my bills. And so
Did we lose her?
yeah, it's like my mic muted for a second.
Oh, no, sorry.
I can handle the crazy. I can handle the trolls because I am unfortunately an expert when it comes to being gang stalked. But what I cannot handle is when our work is intentionally misrepresented, intentionally misconstrued.
Well, what about your work product? Is your work product under the same NDA as everything else, or is that considered separate? And then what kind of protections do you have from your contract under the firms that hire you, as far as, leaving you out there to be legally threatened, legally stalked, charges brought against you for simply doing your job?
None. Absolutely none. And that is why I've been saying the last few days we were put in an impossible position. Let's go back to 2023 for a moment, okay? Jason, I'm sorry for what I'm about to say, but you did what you did, and it is what it is. Jason Jensen brought us in, and then he bailed on every single one of us for another case. We were asking for background checks to be run, and they weren't being completed. We were getting requests to run license plates, and they weren't being done. I was not being given the access to the PI systems that would have allowed me to do those reports. And so one day I get a message from Jensen saying, hey, we're about to lose this case. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Chris and I are working our asses off. Well, I need you to go downstate, meaning go meet with Andy and try to save this case. We get down there, and that's when we were told, we get down there, and it's Andy, Matt, and Dave Hennessy. And that's when Dave tells us that Jason got fired in a court motion. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Are we terminated? They're like, honestly, we didn't know you gals were working as hard as you were working. We had no idea what you guys had been doing because everything we'd submitted to Jason wasn't making its way up the chain. So there was this monumental meeting that took place, and it was just hours long. And I think we ended up coming back and staying the whole weekend. And it was like, holy crap, you gals have done so much that we didn't know about. So then we had to get them up to speed on a lot of stuff. And that is when our paid cut, and then all of that was also kind of timing with when Gull had removed the defense lawyers. And there was this waiting period, this limbo that nobody could work because we actually got text messages saying, stop working, don't work until further notice. Don't do anything on Delphi. And then all of a sudden we get a new text message saying, okay, we're cleared to go back to work, but we're not sure about the pay situation moving forward. From this point on, are you willing to stay on pro bono? Well, by this time, we had fallen completely in love with Kathy. I mean, my God, we weren't going to abandon her. We weren't going to abandon Rick. We weren't going to abandon the lawyers. Like, we had nothing but the utmost respect for the people who worked so hard on this case. And so, you know, Jason can be as butthurt as he wants about what I just said, but damn it, you don't open an agency, hire people, and then throw them to fucking wolves. Like, he bailed on everyone. He bailed on Rick. And for that, I will never forgive him, ever.
You know, I think that, see, I have, for some reason, I think it's just whatever. As far as this case goes, despite all of the shit that was dumped on you guys, do you think that this case is solvable? And I think that everybody here in the chat is expecting you to drop some fantastical bombshell of information that they've never heard before. And the second that you do, they're going to call you a liar or they'll spin it a different way. I mean, I don't know what everybody at this point in time wants to hear. The case, if you're here and you're interested in what she has to say, you clearly don't believe the case is solved. Number one. Number two, what is the information that you want that you're not getting? Besides the details that went on behind the scenes, there are things that cannot be discussed because she's clearly legally obligated to not discuss them. But you're getting a lot of information tonight that you normally wouldn't have otherwise. So please, if you have a question that's not being answered, there's a reason. But Erica, can you explain to us if you feel this case is solvable? And what are your thoughts on, I guess, when you look at this case as a whole, and, you know, we have our people of interest, you know, you've got what, you know, where do you fall on the fence as far as your person of interest, your group of people? Is it really truly the owedness from the Franks motion? Is it truly the property owner like Ron Logan? Or are we missing the ball completely in it being a whole nother group of people that we've yet to hear about? And thank you, ACV, for the $19.99 super chat.
So my first answer is, it's actually our motto. This is our team's motto. Every case is solvable. Someone just has to care enough to solve it. There are thousands of people who care enough to solve this particular case. And I just have to say, I have to reiterate this to every single person who invests their time in watching these YouTubes and creating these YouTubes. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Like, seriously, thank you. Abby and Libby deserve this so much. And I recognize the time and the emotion and the love and the labor that each and every one of you has put in. And please do not think that that goes unnoticed by Christine and I. You are all the next generation of investigators, and we want to teach you everything we know so that we can take as many of these bad guys off the streets. So that is literally our team's motto. Every case is solvable. Someone just has to care enough to solve it. To answer your second question, how do I want to say this? I don't believe that we need to go looking for anyone else at this point. I think that we have enough information as a collective that points us to exactly who is responsible. I also think there has been an extreme amount of intentional confusion thrown out there to throw us all off. And that Christine and I tend to shine. We are very good at working through the minutia and determining what has merit and what does not. And it comes from our years and years of working other cases, looking at statistics, seeing patterns. There's just so much that comes into play with how we isolate and narrow down who the bad guys are. Now,
can you give us, drop us a little bone and give us some ideas of how we've been, like what has been skirted out there to mislead us? If the core group of people that, between either side of the fence you fall on, whether it's the Odinist or the Ron Logan or the Brad Holder group, whoever, can you tell us what is the facet that we can eliminate, that we're not wasting our time on anymore, that you are solely convinced this, besides Rick Allen, because clearly you've already stated your opinion on that, besides Rick Allen, what can be eliminated in this and what cannot? Can you at least give us something like that?
Absolutely. And I was actually getting ready to kind of go into a little bit of detail to help guide some people. So one of the things that drives me nuts is this hair that was found, the hairs that were found wrapped around Abby's fingers, because I need someone in this world to explain to me how that hair got there, 13 hours later. It doesn't compute. So part of me thinks it was placed there intentionally to throw someone off. I don't know. And listen, speculate, debate, trash me, it's fine. That makes no sense to me. I almost feel like that was staged. I could be completely wrong, but my gut, and I just feel like that hair was just so perfectly there. Okay,
really quick. There's a couple of people asking the same question. Was Jason Jensen fired, or did he leave for another case? And if you're saying that you think that Kelsey's hair was planted, who and what would have the ability to have access to that kind of evidence to plant?
Okay, those are two completely different trains of thought. So give me a moment.
Yeah, they are. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm just trying. I'm reading through the chat and I wanted to grab that while it was there because there's like 3 of them in a row. And then I was grabbing what you just said on the last sentence.
Yep, that's totally fine. What we were told by Hennessy was that Jason had been terminated in a court motion, that there had been a reference to them severing their relationship with Jason Jensen, and he was specifically named. It was not Jensen Investigations that was named, it was Jason Jensen of Jensen Investigations. That then resulted in us continuing to stay on, but in a different capacity. I know it's confusing. Trust me, it was confusing to us. We literally lived in limbo for 2 years, it felt like. So sometimes we didn't even know who we reported to, who we were supposed to give information to. Ultimately, everything ended up running through Matt. So I hope that answers that first question. The second question, who would have had the ability to plant that, stage that? Hell, I don't know. I really don't. And I'm not saying it was planted. I'm just saying, with everything that we've looked at, that doesn't make sense. So I sometimes will like kind of visually take that hair out, set it to the side, and look at what everything else comes, what comes together, if so to speak. This is what I would focus on, okay? So Ron Logan, sure, he's an easy mark. He's gone. Like, he's not here to defend himself. He makes an absolutely wonderful scapegoat. I don't know if he is a scapegoat. The one thing that Jason and I always agreed upon is that we both believed that Bridge Guy was Ron Logan. That didn't mean that he committed the crime. However, recently, there have been very strong rumors indicating that Logan may have been a part of an organization or group, but may have been retired from his participation in that group. If that is accurate, and we as a community can find photographic evidence like that photo that was circulating of 4 men, one of them being Ron Logan, if we can find some additional photographic evidence that would link him to this group of people who continuously show up, then it would connect those dots and it would explain why he was doing laps on the bridge. Like maybe he was waiting for someone else to show up. My gut tells me that he was there to block one side of the bridge. And that his property was the access for that. I don't think that a 74-year-old man committed these crimes alone and left 0 DNA evidence. I don't think that's plausible. Whether he was sent to lure someone, whether he was sent to block access to leave, whether he was ordered to allow people on his property. We still have these strong rumors about a militia exercise taking place on that property within 24 to 48 hours of the girls disappearing. And I firmly believe that those rumors could lead us to connecting Ron to the others. And I really hope that I conveyed that in such a way that everybody understands what I'm trying to say.
Hold on. Chris A., it's been publicly documented that Meehan was actually a prison guard who practiced Odinism. So that's not even up for debate.
I have a question. Is it physically possible to have a pig roast when the ground is frozen? Or am I thinking of a different type of pig roast? Because we roast pigs in the ground here, and I don't feel like you could do that in February. Can you though? Is that a thing?
Yes, you can. And
Okay.
the reason I know that is because my mom's whole side of the family was farmers. So up here, we have hog roasts all throughout the year. And my uncle had this big, tall thing. Oh my God, it was like 12, 15 feet high, it felt like. I mean, maybe it wasn't. I was younger. It maybe just felt that way.
Thank you, Rochelle.
2 metal poles with a spigot that the hog would turn on. So yes, it is absolutely possible to have a hog roast in winter in this area.
I'm not so familiar with things being frozen.
I've had too much experience.
Hold on, I'm trying to go through the chat here and back up to a bunch of questions. Let's see. Mavhawk, please tell us how it was documented that Meehan was an Odinist. Google it. Google it. It's publicly available. I'm not even gonna argue with you. So I take it from what you're saying, Erica, is that you're looking for a connection between Ron Logan and Vinlanders, Brad Holden's group. Is that right? You're unmuted.
I know. And I'm
okay.
still nodding.
Okay, well that makes sense. So, what are your thoughts on where Keegan Kline interjects himself into this story? Is that a real possible thing? Because I talked to Reese today about, just because, when I go to work and I'm thinking, I'll send him a message and say, okay, I have more questions. And so I said, call me. He called about 5:30 and I said, okay, so is it possible that Keegan Kline lied to you and just interjected himself in this storyline like he has done so many times before? And Reese really wasn't aware of the storylines from before. When I talked to him about, are you aware that he said that he waited for his dad in a red Jeep, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, this big search in the Wabash River. He really didn't have any knowledge of that. He just simply said, and I feel bad, but he simply said, if he's lying, I'm the dumbest fucking person on the earth, because I don't know how he could have had information about taking the girls off the bridge with the same descriptions that Ron Logan gave me 2 years prior.
So what drives me nuts about Keegan Kline is that I have spoken to people who have interviewed him. And what I was told was that Keegan will lie for a bag of potato chips or $10 on his commissary. So knowing he will say whatever he thinks people want to hear if he will benefit from it, is what I have been told. So when you are trying to deal with someone who is not necessarily truthful, it can be maddening. However, first of all, your work with Reese is exemplary. Thank you. I really cannot thank you enough, because those letters to me are critical. I just cannot stress enough how much I think those letters are important and how much some of the content has allowed us to move further over the last week or two. Like we have we have that fire back, like we have stuff to look at again and really dig into. So thank you for that personally, Amy. But in terms of, was Keegan involved? Was he lying about it? I don't think that we can excuse the fact that Keegan began talking to these girls, on the 1st of February, and by the 14th, they were gone. He was scheduled to meet them that day. Like, it's just too many coincidences that, for me, cannot be ignored. I feel like he was the setup guy. And we made some headway last night on this. So one of the things that we are really focused on right now is trying to identify who the alternate users could have been on that Anthony Schatz account. Because in one of Reese's letters, there's that mention of Keegan helping Ron, like switching phones and uploading some stuff to a prepaid burner phone. Literally not our first rodeo dealing with this situation. So when we heard that,
well, Erica, let me ask you this: have you ever ran into, and I know this in depth with like drop boxes, because so when I owned my business, I had 3 locations, and I had staff at all 3 locations, but we all worked off the same system. So we had 25 teams, for example, and we had certain access to our own teams, and then we had an overview access to the program as a whole. Now, have you ever ran into a system where, for example, with CSAM, you're seeing people selling files? For example, if Keegan was uploading in a Dropbox, and this is where my brain goes. He's uploading, say, a folder of 12-year-olds. And if that's your niche, you pay X amount of money to have access to that folder. If it's some sort of bondage, or, I mean, the sky's the limit with these idiots. And you can label these folders any way that you want, because the way that Reese describes the quote unquote business that Keegan claims him and his dad were running, they were making a lot of money off of selling access to this Dropbox. And the only way that I can see that being feasible or profitable is you're not like, hey, here's my Dropbox, buy it. You're selling it on a price scale for certain categories of interest. I know that sounds disgusting, but that is how I see it working and being profitable, and it being something that he could advertise to when it comes to that kind of sickness, you have people who have certain fetishes. And if you have a variety of things that you've learned to offer over a course of time, you have the ability to, over the course of time, you're just basically collecting photographs, collecting videos. And I mean, you can take the same photograph and the same video and upload it into 2 or 3 different folders. And over a course of time, you could end up with hundreds of thousands. So I don't know if there's any way to prove where this money was coming from, but have you ever seen a Dropbox ran that way in this kind of an organization?
I have personally never seen a Dropbox run that way. However, I think that we could eventually stumble upon more now that we understand this process. In terms of images and volume of images, let me reference the Haley Dunn case for a moment, because in that case, it was more than 108,000 images. So I am interested because of what I know from that case. The Dropbox to me is only one aspect. I want to see things like his email caches, and I want to see the partial fragments and the things that maybe the higher tech guys would have to look at. And that's also something I really want to point out. Why in the hell was this stuff not sent to the FBI for their techs to evaluate? This has been done in other cases that we have worked, and I don't understand why we stopped at this state level to look into this. I really feel like the FBI should have been given all of that information and given a chance to explore it much further. In terms of the Dropbox, if I am visualizing it the way you're explaining, then you can almost have layers, essentially, layers of files, encrypted files. Maybe you are given a password that allows you access only to one portion of a Dropbox. It's kind of funny. I wouldn't be the person to ask about that. Mike Osbrook would be the person to ask about that, because as Mike and I use Dropbox a lot and have in the past to share reports and share information. And he is very good at the encrypted aspect and the VPN aspect. So I would definitely pose that question to Mike as well, because I think he could answer that for you.
Okay, yeah, I know for a fact that you could definitely use the Dropbox as layers. And I have a Dropbox now, and I have probably 6 or 7 different case files in there, and I can share each one of those separately with certain people without giving those same people access to the whole thing. So when Reese started discussing, Keegan was describing meeting with Ron to show him, like, every time they got a new burner phone, he would have to set up access to the Dropbox. That to me registered as making sense, because I know it took me a minute, like with Cherie. I had sent Cherie several times the drops and the links to my Dropbox, and she was having a hard time accessing it. So back then in 2017, a Dropbox back then was, that's like really a new deal. And then you put that on a burner phone where you're probably dealing with your alphabet still on your numbers, ABC, you know what I'm saying? I can see where Keegan showing up, trying to help him, that's where that came in to making sense to me. But I'll be honest, in this case, I never expected Ron Logan to be a suspect for me. And it took me a long time to digest Keegan might not be involved, because it seemed so unreal to me that his role in all of this, from the time the girls went missing to his part in the CSAM and the Dropbox and the communication, his searches when he went to Vegas, all of that to me just screamed he was involved. But then it never went anywhere. But then you go back to, and there's a question in the chat. People want to know if you've ever seen a return on the Ron Logan search warrant.
A return?
Yeah, like items that were seized during the search warrant, items they took.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I will check. I will check on that. And if the answer is yes, and it's just escaping me at the moment, then I will get you that answer if I can. Because if it would depend on whether or not it was in discovery, but I don't think it was. At least not in the discovery that I had. I should say that. At least not in what I had. That's a great question. But let me actually, I'll write that down. Here's what I want to say about Keegan and Ron. First of all, the FBI looked at Ron very, very closely for a long time. And the first thing that they do in a situation like this is create a suspect profile. I'm not a profiler, but I've done a lot of these cases over the years. Keegan, to me, is far too meek. I think he is a behind-the-scenes guy, and I think he's the tech guy. And Reese's letters connecting Ron to Keegan, for me, was major because it made sense. It just all made sense. And then on top of it, we have gone out over the last 2 weeks. You, others, I know several of us have had conversations. Many of us are independently verifying pieces of Reese's story. And it makes sense. Like, he was incarcerated when things were happening. There's no possible way he could have known these things from the press, from wherever, because they weren't even in the press, they weren't even in the chat rooms yet. His letters to me are monumental, and that is why I am so angry that they were withheld. And I don't know why anyone can justify for any reason. I don't care if he failed a lie detector test. I don't give a shit if he wasn't deemed credible. I am not a lawyer, but damn it, as a PI, it seems exculpatory to me.
Do you think, okay, so do you think, because I was kind of, when I was questioning Reese today about Keegan possibly lying, I've never believed for 1 minute. I know other people disagree, but I've never believed for 1 minute that Tony Klein wasn't fully aware of what his son was doing. And if they were a close-knit pack, you know, to go to Vegas and possibly be visiting, you know, Best Little Whorehouse, that sort of thing together, I would expect them to be sharing everything, including details of something like this that maybe Tony had that were shared with Keegan, that could have been shared. I mean, I know that's first, second, third hand, but I'm just trying to wrap my brain around. And I agree with you. I think that Keegan is a fat, nasty, meek POS. But I can't ignore, you know, how do you reconcile the two stories years apart when one person's already dead and gone and then the other person comes into the picture?
I think you reconcile that by connecting as many of the dots as possible based on what we know about Ron. And I think that as a community, we need to learn as much as we can about him now. I think that the profile is there from the FBI, and you know, there are a lot of things, materials that can be found just by using Google. And listen, that is not me being snarky by any means. That is me saying, go do some keyword searches. Start doing things like, what does an FBI profile look like? What does the FBI look for when they build a profile of a killer or a serial killer or a child, you know, a child killer? Whatever those keywords need to be. Don't, you know, ask Google the questions. And especially with a lot of these AI returns now, we're getting better answers and it's leading us to good places. So if you're unfamiliar with an FBI profile or how they build it or what they look for, go ahead and do that Googling and learn a couple things, and you will, I think you'll be a little bit stronger in understanding where our minds are at, okay? We know after working so many cases that the FBI gets it right, okay? And the reason I'm saying this is especially because of our involvement with them in the Haley Dunn case. These are the brightest individuals and they know their stuff. And when we have untrained local Leos kicking the FBI out, that should be a major red flag. We need all the resources we can get on this case. We don't need to be turning people away. It doesn't make sense. So in terms of what can we do now, I think we dig as much as possible into Keegan. I think we don't rely necessarily on what he's said. We rely more on what Reese is telling us. And I'll apologize in advance to Rick Snay. I love you, Rick, but I know you and Tony are close. I got problems. Like, I got problems with that. I have seen too many father-son situations like this. It sounds right to me. We're not there yet. I don't know what that man's involvement may or may not have been, but statistically, it makes sense.
It's nature and nurture. And then have you heard of, I'm sorry, I suck so bad. But have you heard of Jordan Sofer and what her original name was in that family and their connections to the Kleins? And like the amount of pedophilia and violent child rape in that family there is. It's really gross. And like they both have fathers, Tony Klein and Jordan Sofer's biological father. Both have dads named Jerry. Both live in Peru. Both belong to the same like rebel rouser car club and both own 1946 Ford coupes. So, and then we remember that there was a comet looking car seen by someone. She mentioned something like a 65 Comet at the crime scene, and the Kleins have that, and there's family members that have that car as well. But the Kleins have family members, and there are violent rapists who have family members with old Ford coupe looking cars.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that. I really feel like, so if you look at the witnesses in this case, the ones who took the stand, to me, Betsy Blair has always been the most believable and consistent in her story as to what she saw that day. And she had data from her smartwatch to back it up, or her Fitbit. I am very frustrated about the amount of objections that took place and the effort to shut down her story that was done during trial. Betsy should have been given a broader ability to tell that jury what she saw. And it really felt to me like there was a concerted effort to keep that information from being heard.
Have you heard of a Detective Kendall?
Do you know what PD?
I don't know. Someone in the chat keeps mentioning Detective Kendall.
Kendall?
Yeah, Kendall or whatever. I don't know. I suck. Is that me?
There were a couple of detectives out of India. I don't remember their names. I don't remember their names. So I don't, that one doesn't necessarily jump out at me. And I'm
Sounds
pretty
like
good
it's probably
at
out of Peru.
Okay, then no, I wouldn't know.
So Erica, do you have any whoa. Do you have any opinion on the DNA? I know that there's male DNA on both of the girls. Both, I believe, both genitalia. And let me see here.
I still don't understand so they didn't test the male DNA because they lived at home. Is that the reason that they gave? Hello?
There we go. It was my understanding that certain male DNAs weren't tested because they were unusable, like the swabs or the samples were unusable. And as I had said earlier, there are females that have not been ruled out. And I guess the easiest way I can say this, guys, is, again, my perspective. I'm not speaking on anyone else's behalf. I really feel like they picked and chose what to test and what not to test.
It's just odd to me that in that house alone, I'm so sorry that my mic sounds like that. In that house alone, they had like what 20 felonies floating around between everybody in that house, and nothing was tested. Like the phones weren't looked at, the hair wasn't tested. Like it just feels weird, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Feels very weird. It's the way you guys see the disorganization of the investigation. Imagine that disorganization being translated into paper files. It was a nightmare to try to figure this out. And that's why we haven't figured it out yet. There hasn't been enough time from when this discovery was handed over. If anyone out there says that they know who did this, then guess what? You're ahead of everybody else, because we're not there yet. I just have to say that we're not there yet. It is not for lack of effort. It is not for lack of trying. It is not a lack of labor. There is a mountain of information that is, it feels like, intentionally disorganized to make it so hard to put anything together. And then when you just look at this massive list of persons of interest, it's like one day this person, it has to be this person. This makes sense. But then another piece of information comes in that points directly over here. So when you have all of that, the only thing that makes sense is an nexus. There just has to be something in the middle, someone in the middle that connects all of it together. And I am firmly convinced that the Anthony Schatz profile has more answers than we realize. I think we need those users. I think that, how do you go out post-arrest and still say that you're investigating? No. File has a lot of information in there, and we as a collective need it.
So Erica, 2 questions. Well, maybe 3.
What do you think of Judge Fouts?
Oh, come on. You've all seen the video, right?
I know, but I want to know what you think about him. If everything you've seen and everything you know about the community of Delphi, what are your vibes from the Fouts situation?
I think there are a couple of heads of snakes, if you know what I mean. And I think that I'm trying to be careful, but I want to give you guys my honest opinion. I think what we have learned is disgusting. I think it's hard for us to trust anything that would come out of his court, anything that has come out of those cases. I am just disgusted. And I think that there are connections there that explain that hierarchy problem that has taken place in this case. When you have a judge doing what he's doing or what he's done, listen, cancers like that in a community, if they are able to be spread, it is because the community itself has a cancerous problem. Like if one person was doing something and it was only that one person in the community, then that person is to be ostracized and alienated. That is not what happened in that situation at all. And it should really open our eyes. I always look to see who is defending someone in that position. And I don't just mean legally. I mean, who's willing to still have dinner with him? Who's still willing to golf with him? That kind of stuff. And to me, those are the folks that are okay with that behavior.
Can you answer the question about, we have some questions about the DNA. They want to know, is all the male DNA that we see on the diagram, has it all gone untested or just no match? And was there actually male DNA traces of semen found in the girls? Because I do recall hearing that during the trial of the, I think it was Andrea Burkhart that I listened to, relaying, the information from the autopsy, the rape kits, etc. So can you answer those questions?
So I want to be real clear. DNA is not my area of expertise, so please don't think I'm being evasive. I don't want to misspeak, especially when I have accidentally misspoken before. So I'm very careful in that regard. Sorry, I'm having to plug my phone in, so bear with me. My phone is starting to die. So in terms of the male DNA, Chris can absolutely answer that one better than I can, but it's my understanding that the male DNA was all tested, but that they only did like maybe it was the Y chromosome aspect of it, that they didn't test the X factor, if that makes sense. And then I do believe that there are still female DNA that needs to be tested and hasn't been excluded. Not trying to be evasive. So here's the thing, because of the volume of information, there was no possible way that one person could read all of it in a year and a half. It was that massive, you guys. And that's just what we had. There was more that we didn't see that came later. And then there was stuff that was uploaded to a sync drive. Like we ended up getting things in pieces months later. And so in terms of the DNA and the crime scene photos and the autopsy reports, Chris took those. And I had other responsibilities within that was divided up. So she really truly is the one who can answer that better than I. And I don't want to misspeak, but I do believe that I think all of the male DNA was tested. If I'm wrong, Chris, just jump in the comments and correct me because I know she's watching. yeah, I'm going to try to defer to her on that because I just want to get it right. So hopefully she'll jump in and answer the question, guys.
And how do you feel about like where do you lean? Like where does your brain go? What is your pet in the investigation?
So my brain cannot get past the crime scene. It just, the rune on the tree, the what feels like staging, whether it's intentional staging, whether it's ritualistic staging, there was effort there. There was thought put into that. Ergo, to me, this was premeditated. It was not Rick standing on the bridge looking at a stock ticker and decides to go randomly do this thing. Did you mute me or did I just get muted somehow?
I can hear you.
Sorry, I did it.
That's okay.
I was just asking, there's a question in the chat. They wanted to know, do you think it's possible that someone involved in the murders saw a picture on Brad Holder's Facebook of the girls under the branches and staged the scene to implicate him and the Odinists?
Great question. Because there is actually an allegation that that occurred. I can discuss it because it wasn't part of discovery. It was something that we learned independently. If I throw out a name, you'll never hear from me again. Literally, guys, if I go there, I'm gone. There is a very serious allegation that this was done to frame him, to frame Mr. Holder. I don't know if that's true. But it is thoroughly being looked into on this end, actively in the moment. And if there is truth to that, then that would have been done by someone with a lot of power and a lot of connections. And I think that some folks, might understand that. There would have been an order given from up above in an organization for something like that to occur.
Another question is, I don't know why we're getting so much static back. So Rusty Bubbler is asking, have you ever seen the unredacted version of the probable cause affidavit for Keegan Klein?
No. I have struggled to get anything on Keegan. For me, it's been a real challenge. I don't know why. I feel that, and again, maybe that was, if it was included, it would have been included in something that wasn't given to us. But no, I have not. And I want to see it. I desperately want to see it.
Well, Cherie or Streets, do you either one have any other questions, or here at the last hour, guys, drop your questions in real quick?
I know I have questions. Just give me a minute. I'll think of some. Hey, so do you know why the CPS building was abandoned way before the Highway Commission came in to buy it? And it wasn't that old of a building. It was built in like 96 and abandoned by like 2005.
I don't know. I never looked into that, if I'm just being honest. One thing I will say is that there's been a lot of chatter about this land.
Yeah.
About the land surrounding the trails, about the park area. And when I say we are still digging, I kid you not, like we're still digging. There is so much. There are like 50,000 rabbit holes. So when we had to prioritize what we were looking at, it was, what can we find today that will create reasonable doubt? And then we have this list in a notebook. And again, when I say when I say we, I'm meaning me and Chris. There's this notebook of things that we still have to get to. And that land issue is one of them. And I know a lot of people are looking into it. Sorry, I'm trying to reconnect my phone to the stand. I know a lot of people are looking into it, and man, let's just all try to continue to work together to get those answers. I don't know if that CPS building has any meaning, if it being torn down has any meaning. What I will say is that I am tired of crime scenes being destroyed, rebuilt, demolished, or altered. I'm done with it. Like, this has happened to me in another case, and I really feel like we should not be messing with crime scene areas before trials occur. It changes the view, it changes the aesthetics, it changes a jury's ability to see what happened in the moment. You know what I mean? It's just, I'm tired of cities and city managers and whatever deciding to demolish evidence. That's how I feel. Like, when they mess with a crime scene, when they change things around, I feel like they're intentionally destroying evidence. And that's just me. But I'm sick of it.
What about flannel shirt guy? Did you ever come across anything about him that would indicate that he's hinky in any way?
Flannel shirt guy.
Dave McCain.
That would be a Chris question. Yeah, again, just because of dividing and conquering, that would be a Chris question. Now, Muddy Bloody guy? Let me say this.
Muddy Bloody guy.
We haven't completely confirmed it because we were pulled back and not allowed to go conduct the interview, and I'm mad about that. But we came across information close to the end of trial that indicated that Muddy Bloody guy may have been a completely innocent person who just happened to be there and rightfully be there, like somebody who lives in the area, who may have been working on the farm that day, working with animals, and may have just been seen by somebody who then turned around and called that in as a tip. And for me, Muddy Bloody guy is a real problem. Like, I feel like we should have been able to identify that person and try to bring that person into the courtroom. But it felt like we ran out of time. And that's something that we have a list of things for the appellate attorneys. Like I said, we were just asked this afternoon to participate in some debriefing sessions. And I just reached out to Stacy today for the first time, left a message and said, hey, we have a list of things that we would like for you to look at that we think will be helpful. Because our biggest fear right now is that we don't want anything to be missed in the appellate process. And, you know, Rick's trial lawyers are no longer technically his lawyers. We are no longer technically those investigators. Like, the team itself has been dismantled, and whether you has been dismantled just because there's a conviction and a sentence. So it's very important to us that everything we obtained that wasn't allowed to be brought in at trial makes its way to the appellate lawyers so they can evaluate that and then include it if necessary.
What is your opinion on both girls having a phone? Do you think there were 2 phones?
Yes, I do. I do.
So where's the other one? Where do you think it is? I mean, I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying, so where do you
Hell
think
if I know. And I'm not saying that each girl had their own phone. I think that there just could have been 2 phones. I think that, you know, I look at it with my kids, you know, I keep old cell phones. And, you know, my kids will grab an old cell phone, even though they have cell phones, you know, they'll grab my old ones and could just connect to the Wi-Fi so that they can be on the internet playing games or something, but not, you know, tear up their phones with downloading a whole bunch of apps. I think that it is extremely plausible that there was a second phone in play that day. It may not have been a phone that necessarily had service, but yeah, I do think that there was a second phone.
Someone's asking in the chat if they have information, who should they send that to?
At this time, I would send any information to Mark Lehman and Stacy Eliana. They are now the attorneys of record for the appeal. And that is where all of our information will be going.
Okay. Streets, do you have any more questions?
My big thing is maps. And I was just wondering, is there anybody like along that Deer Creek area around Ron Logan that sent your hackles up in any way? I don't know if you can hear me because my sound sucks.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm thinking. I mean, I think everybody at this point is suspicious of Ron's neighbor. I'm not big on throwing people's names out in this case on YouTube because there has been so much unfairness. There's just, like, people don't play by the rules necessarily, and let's not dox people. Let's not throw them under the bus if they didn't do anything wrong. Brad Weber's been put through a lot, you know. I'll say his name because he's been put through a lot. You know, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And when I say I don't know something, what that means is I don't know yet, because I don't like unanswered questions. So I do my best in this life to answer as many of them as I possibly can. We have information that says there's no way he could have been home at the time he was home. But by the same token, if you ask me what I was doing 2 years ago on a Monday afternoon at 4 p.m., I don't know if I can give an accurate answer. You know, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the one thing. Let me say this. The one problem I do have is, you know, for anybody who was in court, that photo that was shown, I don't know if it was really talked about as much as it should have been. I just don't understand why there were full-length tree branches in Brad Weber's garage. That I don't understand.
Wait, say that again. My dog was licking my face. Say that one more time.
There was a photo shown in court to the jury. I think Andy got a hold of it and showed it to the jury. I saw it like minutes before it was brought out. And it was a photo of Brad's garage, and inside his garage was like large tree branches.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I reported enough by the mainstream press. Like, that was the one time when the jury really gasped. They were like, and, you know, I was sitting next to Bob, and he's like, why are they gasping? And I'm like, because Andy just showed him a picture of a big old tree branch in Brad Weber's garage, and nobody can figure out why it was there. And that was located during a search. So, I mean, of course that brings up the hinky meter, but again,
how was it that it was able to be showed to the jury if none of that, if the odonism stuff wasn't allowed? I never heard about this photo being showed to the jury.
So my understanding, and if I get this wrong, my God, I'm so sorry, but it is my understanding that that photo was allowed in because Brad was testifying and Andy was attempting to impeach his testimony with that photo. Because Andy was allowed to show Brad that photo. And of course, Brad became extremely uncomfortable and began fidgeting. And there was like this weirdness in the courtroom, and everybody's whispering. It was a real weird moment.
Okay, wait a minute. What wasn't that at a hearing, not during the trial?
No, honey, that was trial. That was trial. Because I only attended one pretrial hearing. I attended the pretrial hearing where Todd Click testified. So, you know, no, this was in trial, towards the end of trial, actually, because I think Brad was one of the last witnesses. Yeah, it was crazy.
Do you know why the defense rested so early? Was there a strategy to that?
Oops, sorry. I have been specifically told that I cannot discuss trial strategy. So
Okay.
let me give you my opinion on that. I'll just say this. There were so many objections against Rick and against his team, like against his trial lawyers, that it is possible that people chose to reserve information for the appeals process. Like, if it's not going to get in, why try to confuse the jury? I genuinely don't know, but people, you know, I've heard things like, oh, they ran out of steam mid-trial. Let me just tell you, these guys were working day and night. Like, we were taking witnesses over to them at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night saying, you want to talk to this person? This person just brought us this information. So it was not for lack of effort. My personal opinion or perspective is that when so many things are going against you, maybe you just pull back and reserve it for the appeal. That's my perspective.
Maybe at that point they just knew that they were more, I don't know. Still finding out information in trial?
I'm sorry?
Were they still getting information at trial?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes. We worked night and day to get information during trial and after trial. Like afterwards, our phones were ringing off the freaking hook. It was so maddening because I remember saying to people, why didn't you call me 2 weeks ago? Well, I didn't think he was going to be found guilty. Well, look where we are now. Like, I think that the verdict in some ways shook the trees and some of those apples started to fall because I think people genuinely believed that he wouldn't be convicted because there was nothing against him. Like, the case was so flimsy that I really think people thought it wasn't going to happen. And then when it did, the guilt kicked in and people were like, oh crap, I got to tell them what I know. So then it was this mad rush for the motion to correct error. And that was one of the reasons why I did not speak out. I mean, I did that appearance on Court TV and then I went silent for a long time. And that was because I was night and day working with Osbrook on getting this information for the motion to correct error. All of this stuff with the attorney, with Gibson, all of that. So, yeah.
Were you ever able to solidify where Rick parked that day?
Yes. So he parked. Oh, crap. Was it the? I get this mixed up. Was it the old? It wasn't the old. Was it the old CPS building or the old Farm Bureau? I think it was the CPS building, but Doolin put it in as the Farm Bureau building. I think that's how it went. I'm pretty sure.
Did that property across the street from CPS before the highway went in, was that the old Farm Bureau?
I don't
because
know
that would be across
offhand.
the Freedom Bridge. If
Yeah,
it's the old Farm Bureau.
Yeah, there was confusion about that, and I do know because Kathy got really upset when we were looking at that report. I do believe it was that Dan Doolin put that into the report incorrectly. So Rick was listed as having parked in one location when he really parked in another. And without my notes in front of me, I don't want to misspeak. So that's on me.
Okay, guys. Well, it is 10:30. We've been on here for 3.5 hours. I think it's time to wrap it up. Love you guys, but I have to be up at 3 a.m.
So do I. I have to eat. I've been eating chips. I don't know if you can tell. But my body craves substance.
Erica, thank you so much for coming on. And I want to have you on again. And I know that everybody's ears are bleeding. They want more, but I know you can only do so much.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on here to, I guess, be human with you all for the first time in this case, to let you see who I am and who I'm not, and to allow for everybody to make their own opinions based on tonight's conversation instead of what somebody may have read third hand from someone who's never met me. That means more to me than you will ever know. And I hope that I have done my best to answer as many questions as I could without getting myself in trouble or revealing something that needs to be used to set Rick free.
Well, I am very grateful that you came on. I'm very grateful to everybody in the chat. Hopefully you guys all enjoy the live. I'll have Erica back on. Streets or Sharita, either one of you have anything to say?
Thank you. Sorry my mic sucked.
That's what I wanted to say too, is thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us.
All right, guys. We will see you next time. Enjoy your evening. I'm going to
See
go
you guys
eat some dinner.
later. Good night.
Good night.